What outfit are you with, sweetheart? The woman turned from the terrace window. She had been looking at the water, the way the last light sat on San Diego Bay at 6 in the evening, with the particular stillness of someone who has spent a great deal of time in the air and knows how to read what the light is doing. She looked at the rear admiral. She did not look at his stars. "I flew," she said. The man beside him, a naval captain with a drink in his hand, made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Rear Admiral James Calloway had 31 years of making rooms lean toward him. He had the jaw for it, and the record for it, and the specific social confidence of a man who has never once in his career been the least important person in any room he has entered. He looked at this small Filipino woman in her blue-green dress, with no insignia and no rank anywhere visible, standing alone by the terrace doors, and he made the calculation that men like him make so quickly they do not experience it as a decision. He smiled. "You flew," he repeated. "For the room, not for her. Army aviation," she said, a while back. He looked at the captain. The captain was already smiling. "Well," the admiral said, "Army aviation," as though the words were the punchline. "And what did Army aviation have you flying?" "Black Hawks, mostly, sometime in Little Birds." "Ah," he nodded with the thoughtful expression of a man performing consideration. "Medevac? Logistics? Special operations aviation?" The captain's smile had become uncertain. The admiral's had not. "Special operations aviation." He said it gently, the way you say something a child has announced with great confidence that doesn't quite add up. He gestured toward the metal display behind him, the rows of decorations mounted on the ceremony board. "And you're here tonight for—" "I was invited," she said. "Of course you were." He looked at the gathering crowd of officers, active, retired, special operations, naval special warfare, Army aviation, all of them in dress uniforms and civilian formal wear, filling the Hotel del Coronado's ballroom for the annual joint ceremony. "Spouse? Daughter of a—" "I flew," she said again. Still level, still unhurried. The admiral looked at his captain. He looked at the two officers who had drifted over, because a flag officer holding court is a gravitational event, and officers learn early to orbit. He spread his hands with the generous smile of a man who is about to be very entertaining. "Well then, tell us about it. What was your call sign?" She looked at him. There was something in the look, not wariness, not anger, that a careful person might have read as the expression of someone deciding how much rope to give. She gave him rope. "Sampaguita," she said. The captain laughed. One short sound. The admiral's smile stretched wide. "Sampaguita," he repeated it with the accent of someone who has used the word as a punchline before, at a dinner, at a briefing, at some gathering where the legend of the Sampaguita extraction came up and became the centerpiece of his story about American military excellence. The story he had been telling for 15 years. The story of the anonymous pilot who flew 4 passes into an unsurvivable valley and brought 11 Special Forces soldiers home. He told it at every gathering. He told it because his nephew Derek was one of those 11 men. He told it as proof of the legend, as proof of the branch, as proof, in the way these things work, of something that reflected well on everyone in the room, and on Thomas Birch, on James Calloway, who happened to be present to testify to it. He had never looked for the pilot's face. He said it now like a punchline he had used before, because to him it was exactly that. "Sampaguita," he said it to the room. "Somebody get this woman a medal." The officers around him laughed. 2 phones came up. Because a flag officer being amusing is content, and content is currency, and the people holding the phones had not yet understood what they were filming. "As a matter of fact," she said, very quietly, "that's why I'm here." but he had already turned away to say something to the captain. Before we go any further into this story, type 777 in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. If you believe that the quiet ones are almost always the ones holding the line, please like this video, subscribe, and stay with us. Because in a few minutes, someone is going to cross this room, and what he's been carrying in his pocket for 15 years is going to change everything this Admiral thinks he knows about the legend he's been telling. Her name was Lourdes Buenaventura. Everyone who loved her called her Lori. She was 45 years old. She had come to the Hotel del Coronado not for the decoration they were planning to put on her chest, but for one specific, private reason that had nothing to do with herself. She was there because they were finally going to read Crispin's name aloud. She was born in Pangasinan, the second of 4 children, daughter of a man who fixed engines for fishing boats and a woman who taught elementary school and who had between them the specific combination of patience and precision that Lori would spend her whole life being told. By the people who flew with her, she had inherited in equal parts. She came to the United States at 16. She enlisted in the Army at 18 because she wanted to fly, and the Army was the fastest way to the cockpit available to a 19-year-old Filipina from Salinas, California, who had $40 in savings and a mechanical aptitude that made her recruiter look twice at the test results. She flew. She was, by every measurable standard available to the people who measured such things, exceptional. Not in the way that draws attention. She was not a showman, not a braggart, not the kind of aviator who fills a debrief with her own name. She was exceptional in the way that certain instruments are exceptional. Reliable past the point where reliability is expected to fail. Precise at the specific moment, when precision is the only thing standing between the aircraft and the ground. She flew Black Hawks. She flew Little Birds. She spent 8 years in the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, the unit that goes where other aviation units are told not to go, at night, in weather that grounds everything else, in conditions that the doctrine considers unsurvivable, and that the 160th has been quietly surviving for decades. Her crew chief for the last 4 of those years was a man named Crispin Bohol. Crispin was from Cebu. He was 32 years old when he died on the ridgeline. He was the kind of man who managed a failing engine and called rotor speed and talked his pilot through the impossible with the specific steadiness of someone who has decided, a long time ago, that panic is a choice and he is not going to make it. He laughed at his own jokes constantly. He kept a running list of the food he was going to eat when they got home. He drew things on napkins, designs, diagrams, the small aircraft schematics that mechanics carry in their heads and sometimes need to put on paper. He drew the tattoo design on a napkin in the barracks, 2 wings surrounding a single rotor blade. Simple, clean, the kind of thing you draw when you're sitting across from your pilot at the end of a deployment, and you are both still alive, and neither of you knows how to say that. He had told her he was going to get it done someday. He never got the chance. She had it done for both of them. After the funeral, after the folded flag went to his mother in Cebu, and the classified report went into a drawer, and the extraction that never officially happened was processed by the people whose job it is to process things that never officially happened, Lori had driven to a shop in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and sat in the chair for 40 minutes and let the needle do Crispin's drawing on her right forearm, permanent, exactly where he would have wanted it, where she would see it every time she reached for anything. She wore long sleeves most days, not out of shame, out of the particular privacy of a person who has learned that some things belong to you and to the people who earned the right to know them, and not to strangers at parties who have decided in 10 seconds what your life adds up to. She had retired quietly after the mission. She had never filed for recognition. She had never spoken about the valley or the aircraft or the 4 trips or the ridgeline. She had gone back to California and opened a small aviation maintenance shop in the San Joaquin Valley. And she fixed the engines of crop dusters and small prop aircraft and charged what the work cost and nothing more. And her neighbors knew her as the woman who could fix anything with wings and who was precise and honest and quiet in all seasons. She had never told anyone about Crispin, the Silver Crew wing he had once pressed into her palm, for the smoothest landing he had ever not felt, he said, laughing, lived in her left chest pocket every day. The way other people carry a phone or a transit card. A weight she had learned the shape of. Present without requiring attention. The envelope had come 6 weeks ago, official, sealed. The kind of stationery that means the classification on something has finally changed. She had read it twice at the kitchen table of the house she had built herself over 3 years in a valley between the coastal mountains. The mission on the ridgeline had been declassified. The Distinguished Service Cross. A ceremony. She had almost said no. She had drafted the no in her head while doing an oil change on a Cessna 172. She had refined it during the engine run. She had been ready to send it. Then she read the last paragraph. The names of all personnel involved would be read into the public record for the first time. Crispin's name. Read aloud. In a room full of the living. She had driven to the shop, turned the sign to closed, and called the ceremony coordinator. She would come. She would say almost nothing. She would hear his name. She would drive home and open the shop on Monday. That was the plan. She had not known about the Admiral. She had not known that for 15 years, a man she had never met had been telling the story of the Sampaguita extraction at dinners and ceremonies and flag-level briefings to gathered rooms of officers, using the legend of an anonymous pilot to make rooms go quiet and then break into appreciation directed, in the way these things work, at everyone present, and at the man with the stars who was present to testify to the legend. She had not known that the story had become his story, that the faceless pilot had become a legend he owned. She had not known that when she set her call sign, she was saying it to the man who had been using it as punctuation for 15 years. Now she stood by the terrace window while he turned back to his captain, and she let the moment sit the way she had learned to let things sit, on a ridgeline, in a cockpit, in every room where a man had decided before she opened her mouth what she was going to be. She reached into her left chest pocket. Her fingers found the wing. She held it for a moment. She let it go. A hand touched her arm. She turned. He was a few years younger than her. Dress uniform. Lieutenant Colonel's Eagles. She did not know his face, but she knew his eyes. The particular eyes of someone who has spent a great deal of time being absolutely certain they are going to die and then not dying. Those eyes do not go away. They stay on a person the way the cold stays on a ridge. He was looking at her forearm, at the 2 wings surrounding a single rotor blade. His mouth opened. He closed it. He tried again. Sampaguita, he said. It did not come out the way the Admiral had said it. It came out the way people say the name of something they have been praying toward for 15 years. Quietly, like a word they were not sure they were allowed to say out loud. She looked at him. He pulled back his left sleeve. On his shoulder, visible now where the dress jacket had shifted, was a tattoo of his own. 11 rotor blades arranged in a circle, and at the center a small 5-petaled flower. She recognized the flower. Sampaguita, I was the second one out on the first pass, he said. His voice was not working properly. You came back 4 times. My arm was broken. I couldn't hold thee. He stopped. He started again. The 4th pass, the rotor was... He stopped again. We counted the sound. We counted the rotations. We knew the blade was compromised. And you came back. She looked at him for a long moment. Did you make it off? She said. It was the thing she had never known. After the ridgeline, after the rescue aircraft came, she had gone back up to bring Crispin down. She had not been there to see whether the last load got out. We all made it, he said. He said it like a man who has said it thousands of times as a prayer and is saying it to the person it was always meant for. 11. All 11. She closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, she said, "What's your name?" Derek Birch. She did not say anything for a moment. She looked at the tattoo on his shoulder, at the 11 blades, at the flower in the center. Crispin designed that, she said. Not accusing, just saying it. Derek Birch looked at the flower. We had a sketch. From a napkin. One of the guys, Reyes, he had it. Said the pilot's crew chief had left it somewhere. We used it because... He stopped. Because he was part of it. The way she flew. We could hear them talking through the whole thing. Her and her crew chief. We could hear him on the radio, calling the engine. He swallowed. We didn't know until the debrief that he was gone. We didn't know. We thought both of them. He went out on the 5th pass, she said. She said it plainly, the way you say a fact that is also a wound, not to make it smaller, because it deserves to be said plainly. Derek Birch pressed his lips together. He nodded. I know, he said. I read the report when it declassified. He reached into his jacket pocket. He took out a coin, small, worn at the edges, brass-colored. On one side, a rotor blade and a mountain range. On the other, a single word. Sampaguita, we had these made, he said. All 11 of us. We've been looking for you for 15 years. His hand was shaking when he held it out. She looked at the coin. She took it. She closed her hand around it. Thank you, she said, for looking. From across the room, Rear Admiral Calloway had turned back and was watching the exchange with the expression of a man trying to read a situation that has begun to make him uneasy without knowing why. He watched the lieutenant colonel's face. He watched the woman take something from the lieutenant colonel's hand. He watched the lieutenant colonel's expression do something he had not seen on Derek's face in 15 years of knowing him. He crossed the room. Derek, he said. Everything all right? Derek Birch turned to face his uncle. His eyes were wet, and he was not doing anything about it. He was the kind of man who had learned that there are moments when the question of whether anyone can see you crying is simply not the most important thing happening. Uncle James, he said. His voice was very even. I'd like to introduce you to someone. He stepped aside. The Admiral looked at the woman in the blue-green dress. He looked at her forearm, at the sleeve that had shifted when she took the coin, at 2 wings surrounding a single rotor blade. He looked at that tattoo the way a man looks at something he knows from somewhere and cannot immediately place. Then he placed it. The room went very loud inside his head and very quiet outside it. He had heard the tattoo described. Derek had described it to him dozens of times. The flight suit with the sleeve rolled up. The small shape on the forearm of the person who had come down off the ridgeline to carry the last 2 men to the extraction point by hand in the dark. 2 wings. A single rotor blade. He looked at the woman's face. He looked at the coin in her closed hand. He looked at Derek's eyes, and at the 11-blade tattoo visible now on Derek's shoulder, where the uniform jacket had shifted. He said nothing. Rear Admiral James Calloway, who had filled every room he had ever entered with the sound of his own certainty, said nothing. The Master of Ceremonies stepped to the podium at the front of the room. He tapped the microphone once. Gently, ladies and gentlemen. We are here tonight to do something that is 15 years overdue. A mission that was classified at the highest level has been declassified. A pilot who flew 4 extraction passes in a compromised aircraft in zero visibility conditions and then carried the last 2 men to the landing zone by hand is here tonight, in this room, to receive the Distinguished Service Cross. The room had already been quieting. Now it went entirely still. For 15 years, every person who knows what happened in that valley has had to refer to this pilot by a single word. Her call sign. He paused. Tonight, we can say her name. Chief Warrant Officer 3 Lourdes Buenaventura, United States Army, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, retired, known to the 11 men she brought home as Sempagita. The sound that moved through the room was not applause. It was something lower than applause. Something that only happens in rooms full of people who have seen difficult things and understand the specific arithmetic of what they are being told. 30 years of combined flight time in this room, and every person in it was doing the numbers, and the numbers did not add up. And they understood that this was the whole point. 2 phones had already started recording before the Master of Ceremonies spoke. They were recording the Admiral's face. An Army general in the second row was the first to his feet. Then a senior master sergeant near the door, 26 years on his sleeve, who had heard the Sempagita story told badly at too many dinners and now understood it had always been told by the wrong person. He came to attention so sharply it was audible. Then the room rose. Not all at once, but in the way that respect moves when it is real. From the people who understand first, outward, until the whole room is standing. Lori walked to the front of the room. She did not look at the Admiral on her way. The general who presented the decoration read the citation the way citations should be read, slowly, so each word has room to land. He read the range and the visibility and the rotor blade and the 4 passes and the ridge line and the 6 hours and the last 2 men carried by hand. He read the line about the crew chief, and he said Crispin's name, Sergeant First Class Crispin Bohall, crew chief, 160th SOAR, killed in action securing the extraction of his pilot. And the room that had already been silent went quieter still. Because there is a silence specific to the reading of names, and this room knew it. When they settled the Distinguished Service Cross against the front of her blue-green dress, Lori stood exactly as she had stood by the terrace window an hour before. Still, contained, not taller, not prouder. Because she had been carrying this the whole time, and the metal against her chest weighed less than what she already held there. They asked her to say a few words. She looked at the room, at the officers standing, at Derek Birch with his wet face and his 11-blade tattoo, at the Master of Ceremonies, at the podium. She did not look at the Admiral. She said, "I'm not going to talk about the valley. The people who were there know it. The people who weren't don't need the details to understand what it cost." She paused. "I'll only say this. I did not fly those passes alone. A man named Crispin Bohall managed the engine and called the rotor speed and talked me through every second of every pass. He is the reason I had anything left to fly with on the 4th trip in. He is the reason I could carry 2 men down a ridgeline at zero visibility when I had been in the aircraft for 7 hours, and the aircraft should have been on the ground 4 hours before that." She looked at the decoration on her chest. "He should be wearing this, or his name should be on it, at minimum. I've asked the Army to correct the record. I'm told that process is underway." She looked at the room. "I'll say one more thing. In this room tonight, someone suggested to me, twice, very helpfully, that I had wandered into the wrong ballroom, that I should try the service entrance." She said it without sharpness, without performance. the way you state a fact about the weather. I've heard versions of that my whole life. In flight school, in the regiment, in every room where someone looked at me and made a decision before I spoke. She reached into her left chest pocket. She took out the silver crew wing, the one Crispin had pressed into her palm for the smoothest landing he had ever not felt, and she held it up so the room could see it. This belonged to my crew chief. He gave it to me as a joke. He told me it was for the collection. She looked at it. I've been trying for 15 years to figure out how to deserve it. I think the answer is probably that you don't deserve this kind of thing. You just carry it and try to be worth it. She put it back in her pocket. Be kind to the people you've decided are beneath you. You are almost never standing as high up as you think you are. And the person you have decided is nobody is very often the one holding the line you are standing safely behind. She stepped back from the podium. The room stayed on its feet. An ensign near the stage was crying without any apparent awareness of it. The bartender, a retired chief who had worked naval events for 20 years and had poured drinks for every kind of important person there was, had come out from behind the bar and was standing at attention. Even the camera crew hired to film the evening had slowly, without coordination, stopped filming and stood. In the tradition of the Medal of Honor and of the Distinguished Service Cross, when the ceremony commander so directs, the first salute belongs to the recipient. Every member of the armed forces, regardless of grade, renders it first. Derek Birch rendered it before anyone else could move. Rigid, reverent, the slowest salute of his career. Tears running off his jaw. The Army General saluted. The Senior Master Sergeant. The naval officers, the civilian guests who had served, stood at attention. The ones who hadn't stood anyway, because the room required it. In the back of the room, Rear Admiral James Calloway stood with his hand at his side. He had told the story of Sampaguita 100 times. He had told it in this ballroom, at this event, 4 years ago. He had told it as proof of American military excellence, and as proof, in the way these things work, of the legend of the program, and of the people associated with it, and of James Calloway, who was present to testify. He had told it without ever looking for her face. He had found her face tonight, 45 minutes ago, and he had told her to try the service entrance. His hand came up. It was not a gracious gesture. Everyone in the room understood that his hand came up, because it had no other place to go, because the decoration on that woman's chest outranked every star on his shoulder, because the tradition was clear, because 3 cameras were pointed at him, because his nephew was already rendering the most reverent salute of his career, and the gap between them was the most visible thing in the room. He saluted her. Lori returned it. Crisp, correct, the exact courtesy she had always been owed. In giving it, she made the distance between them visible in a way that every person in the room would carry for the rest of their careers. She had simply been the better officer, in every room, including this one, and the salute made that a matter of public record. The Admiral held his for the required duration and lowered it. He looked at his nephew. Derek had moved to stand at Lori's side. He had not looked at his uncle during the salute. He was looking at the woman beside him, at the wing in her left chest pocket, at the decoration against her blue-green dress. When he finally turned to face his uncle, his face was calm and specific and final in the way of someone who has made a decision they will not be revisiting. "Uncle James," he said. His voice was even. "You told her story at dinner parties. Every time I came home, I asked if you'd found her. You said the mission was classified. You said there was nothing to find." He looked at his uncle steadily. "You were right that it was classified. What you could have done, if you had wanted to, was stop telling the story. Stop using it. Stop letting rooms applaud for it while the people who actually did it had nothing. He paused. You found her tonight in 30 seconds. You had the wrong idea about who she was in 30 seconds. He shook his head. Once. I'm going to take her to dinner, he said. If she'll let me, and you can do whatever you need to do. Lori looked at Derek. Ang lahat ng magandang bagay ay ginagawa ng tahimik, she said quietly. All beautiful things are done quietly. She said it the way Crispin used to say it, with a small, precise smile, the kind that only arrives when something is both funny and exactly right. Derek didn't speak Tagalog, but he understood the tone. I'll get my jacket, he said. What happened after happened, the way these things happen when someone has been on camera, being his worst self. Quickly, completely, and in permanent detail. The footage was everywhere by morning. 4 angles, because 4 people had their phones out during the pre-ceremony cocktail hour when the Admiral was being amusing, and none of them had stopped recording when the amusement left the room. The clip that traveled widest was 48 seconds. It showed the Admiral saying Sempagita with a grin to a room of laughing officers. It showed him turning away. It showed Derek Birch crossing the room and stopping in front of the woman and showing her the tattoo on his shoulder. It showed the Admiral crossing to join them, and his face, and the moment he recognized what was on her forearm, and went entirely still. The room knew what they were watching before the internet did. The officers who had laughed at the Admiral's performance were the first to understand what they had participated in, and the understanding was not comfortable. Several of them went to find the Master of Ceremonies before the ceremony began. 3 of them found Lori directly. The Naval Special Warfare Command issued a statement 36 hours after the footage spread. The statement used the words regret and conduct and review, and did not use the word Admiral more than twice. The review was formal. The outcome was what outcomes are when a flag officer has humiliated a Distinguished Service Cross recipient on camera at a joint military ceremony in front of 200 officers and their phones. Rear Admiral James Calloway retired at his current grade. The promotion board that had been reviewing his record quietly closed the file. The ceremony photographs, the ones where he saluted Lori, ran on every military publication's website. In all of them, his expression is the expression of a man who has finally understood what importance actually requires. His nephew did not call him for 3 months. When he did, the call was brief and civil, and did not revisit the ballroom. The Birch family understood, without anyone saying it, that some rooms you don't get to walk back into. Lori drove back to the San Joaquin Valley the morning after the ceremony. She opened the shop on Monday. A week later, a crop duster brought in for a carburetor issue sat longer than expected in the bay, and the farmer who owned it, a third-generation Tulare County man named Ed Watts, who had known Lori for 6 years and trusted her with every piece of equipment he had, leaned against the bay door drinking bad coffee and said, "Saw something about you online." Lori looked up from the carburetor. "Yeah," she said. "They gave you a big medal." "They did." Ed looked at the carburetor. "You never said anything. You never asked what I flew," she said. He considered this. "Fair." He drank his coffee. "The carburetor going to be okay?" "Ready Thursday," she said. The float valve seat was worn. "I had the part." "Good," he said. "Thanks, Lori." He went to wait in the truck. She went back to the carburetor. 3 months after the ceremony, she drove to Cebu. She had never been. She knew the province from Crispin's descriptions, from the years of him telling her about the market near his mother's house, and the smell of the salt air, and the specific quality of the light in the late afternoon that he said was different from anywhere else he had ever been. He had described it the way she flew, precisely, with no wasted words, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows what they are talking about. His mother, Perla, was 71 years old. She lived in the same house where Crispin had grown up, a concrete house with a tin roof and a garden she tended with the same precision her son had applied to everything. When Lori knocked on the gate, Perla came to the door in a house dress and looked at her visitor without recognition for a moment. Then she looked at Lori's forearm. She had seen the drawing. Crispin had sent it to her in a letter years before. "This is what I'm going to get when I get home, Nene. Tell me if it's good." She had kept the letter. She had the design memorized. She opened the gate. They sat at the kitchen table for a long afternoon. Lori told her everything. The engine calls, the rotor speed. The voice that had told her, calm and steady and exact, what the aircraft was doing and what it needed and whether it had anything left. She told her about the napkin drawing and about the cold on the ridgeline and about the 6 hours she had waited on the rocks with 2 men she had brought down by hand because she would not leave a job unfinished. She told her about the 15 years. She took the brass coin from her pocket, the one Derek had pressed into her palm in the Hotel del Coronado, the 11-blade rotor with the Sampaguita flower at the center, and she placed it on the table between them. "The men he saved made this," she said. "They carried it for 15 years looking for me. When they found me, I asked if I could bring it to you. Because it belongs with the person who made him." Perla looked at the coin for a long time. She picked it up. She turned it over. She looked at the flower. "He said you were the best pilot he ever flew with," Perla said. Her English was careful and precise, the way Crispin's had been. He wrote it in his last letter. He said, "Nane, I fly with someone who makes the aircraft do things it does not know it can do. She is the most dangerous introvert in the hemisphere, and I am very lucky." Lori pressed her lips together. Perla set the coin down and covered it with both hands, and looked at Lori across the table. "Ang lahat ng magandang bagay ay ginagawa ng tahimik," Perla said. Lori looked at her. "He used to say that," Perla said, "since he was small, every time someone asked why he was so quiet about the things he was proud of." She smiled. Crispin's smile. The one that took over the whole face. All beautiful things are done quietly. Lori stayed for 3 days. She slept in Crispin's room, which Perla kept the way parents keep rooms. Not frozen in grief, but held in readiness, as though the person who filled it might simply come back through the door. On the last morning, Perla made her breakfast and packed her food for the journey, and stood at the gate and held both Lori's hands in hers. "Thank you," Perla said, "for bringing him home from the ridge, and for coming here." "He brought me home first," Lori said, "every pass. He kept calling the engine until there was nothing left to call." She drove back to Manila. She flew back to California. She opened the shop on Monday. There is a small thing she does now that she did not do before the ceremony. When a young person comes into the shop, a student pilot, an apprentice mechanic, someone on their first real job, and they are struggling with something, and they are trying to hide the struggling because they have been made to feel that struggling means they don't belong there. She rolls her right sleeve back a couple of inches, just enough to show the tattoo. She does not explain it. She does not make a speech. She just lets them see the 2 wings and the rotor blade, and she goes back to work, and somewhere behind her, someone stands a little straighter. Crispin would have laughed at the size of the mail pile she started receiving after the ceremony. Letters from maintenance workers and ground crew and enlisted personnel, and everyone who has spent years being the person a room decides to look through. She answers every one by hand. She figured she owed them that. Before I end this story, I would like to leave you with this. Rear Admiral James Calloway had 31 years of rooms leaning toward him. He had told the legend of Sampaguita 100 times in those rooms, to 100 audiences, and he had let the legend warm him, and the rooms had let him own it. He had never once in 31 years looked for the pilot's face. He found it in 30 seconds on a terrace in San Diego, and he decided in those 30 seconds, before she opened her mouth, what she was, and she told him, precisely and accurately, what she was. And he laughed. Lori Buenaventura stood in that ballroom not to win an argument, not to make a point, not to correct the Admiral or embarrass him or give anyone a clip for their phone. She stood there to hear one name spoken aloud in the light, the name of the man who had kept a failing engine running and called the rotor speed and pressed a crew wing into her hand for the smoothest landing he had ever not felt. Ang lahat na magandang bagay ay ginagawa ng tahimik. All beautiful things are done quietly. Crispin said it since he was small. He lived it until the end. He flew in the dark and called the wind and kept the engine and died on a ridgeline doing the most beautiful thing available to him, which was making sure someone else came home. The quiet ones are watching over you. The overlooked ones are so often holding the line. You never know who is standing next to you at the bar. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it today. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and we will see you in our next story.